So I just finished watching A Private Little War. This was a really heavy episode. And I can see this becoming an episode that furthers more discussion. This was at the core of the social commentary episodes that Star Trek was all about in the 1960s. And I think so far this has been probably the strongest one on what was kind of going on at the time. The premise is that Kirk and crew go to this planet that Kirk had been on many, many years ago, where he had lived amongst these villagers and had done a study there. I like this setup already because it shows more of Kirk's past, and that he did more than just sit in a captain's chair, take his shirt off, and make out with women. He does have a military background. He does have somewhat of a diplomacy background. These things are great. We're getting more about this character every time. So he lived amongst the hill people in this world where everybody is still very primitive. And there was also the village people, which sounds really funny now that I'm saying it out loud. So we have the hill people and the village people, and all they had were bows. And when Kirk and Spock beam down the planet, they find that the village people now have flintlock muskets. Wow, that was kind of a cool twist. I like that. I didn't see that coming. And right off the bat, Spock gets shot. Great opener. We take one character out, one of the main characters. So it wasn't like they beam down with a red shirt and he gets killed. It's Spock who gets shot through the chest. We know Spock is going to live, but they still did a really good job building the tension with this one. And it goes from there into just a series of people making poor decisions, for the most part. This is where I think the episode really gains its strength. First is, back on board the Enterprise, Kirk is in the bridge, and he's talking to Scotty and Uhura and a few of the others about the fact that they now have these flintlock muskets, and where did they come from? Why do they have them, and the hill people still have arrows? And the last time he was there, they only had arrows, and they're talking about how fast it took human beings on Earth to develop flintlocks from going from bows, and it was like 1,200 years in the making and everything like that. And so they bring up this neat point about rate of development. How fast does a culture grow? I thought that was a really cool point, especially after we just finished watching a piece of the action not too long ago, where that was kind of the opposite, where this civilization really didn't develop at all. They just took whatever they had. Now here we have this group that's developing faster. Or are they? Because all of a sudden they pick up a Klingon ship out in the distance. Are the Klingons there for research, or are the Klingons there for something else? And that brings up a cool point. Kirk first says that, the Klingons would have no real stake in this planet because they're not scientists like the Federation is. Okay, interesting point. But the Klingons have got to have scientists. I mean, how else would they develop their own weapons and their own ships? And from my understanding, the Klingons have been doing space travel much longer than human beings have, so they would have to have some sort of scientific board. Maybe not as scientific as the Vulcans, which we know is like a civilization that is all based around science and logic. We also get a really great insight into Kirk's character, where the different members of the bridge begin bringing up this whole rate of development and where do the weapons come from, and they are all kind of almost ganging up on Kirk because he seems to be in denial a little bit. And Kirk is like, this is not up for debate. It really shuts everybody down. And I was like, wow, that was an interesting moment right there. Kirk's power is being challenged by his crew, and how does he react? So anyway, Spock is in the med lab, and we have an introduction of a new character who I'm hoping we get to see more of. He's another doctor who has apparently studied Klingon physiology, which is wonderful because Bones keeps bringing up that he doesn't know where anything is. He's like, well, he's lucky he got shot and that his heart is where his kidney should be. And it's like, dude, at some point, Bones, learn how Vulcans work. Okay, they're part of the Federation. One of them serves on your ship. He's like one of your best friends. Don't you think you should learn how his body works? Anyway, this other guy apparently interned at a Vulcan hospital, so he knows what's going on. He's going to take care of Spock. which frees up Bones and Kirk to go down to the planet, so we have our other two main characters in action there. When they get down there, Kirk is attacked by this monster and he's poisoned. I was really hoping they were going to keep Kirk out of the picture much longer than they did. Unfortunately, he's revived relatively quickly. I thought this would have been a great opportunity to have both Spock and Kirk completely out of the picture and let McCoy run the show. Or at least be the star of this one. Unfortunately, they didn't, and they have to have William Shatner in that lead there. Okay, so I was a little disappointed with that, but the story moves on, and this is where I think the story starts getting really interesting, is finding out where do the village people get their weapons from, and it turns out it's the Klingons. The heart of this episode really gets into looking at an arms race. The village people now have muskets, the hill people only have arrows. Kirk wants to even the score and give the hill people the same weapons. Wow, what an interesting premise. And my head is still kind of spinning about this one. What point does it become too much? When we are now arming both sides. And I can see a lot of this was commentary on the Cold War. That we didn't want some country being overrun by the Soviets, and so the United States would arm them. And the Soviets would see that they were armed, so they would arm another country. And look at places like Korea and Vietnam at the time, and the arms race that was going on, and then just the general arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union. That's what we're getting here, is this planet of who were very peaceful people. Kirk's entire thesis was based on the fact that this planet, left alone, will become a great superpower of peace and justice in the future. That, yes, they did have weapons, but they only used them for hunting. And here is this primitive tribe, but they're all about compassion. And we see that when they take Kirk in to heal him. And now we're giving them weapons. And weapons so they can kill their enemy. That's some pretty intense stuff. And this is the first episode where I feel that Kirk's decisions, and in this case, some poor decisions, have some really serious consequences. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but I really enjoyed it because it is not the happy ending we normally get where everything turns out great, Kirk has saved the day, and Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are somewhere on the Enterprise. McCoy and Spock joust a little bit with some words, they all laugh, freeze frame, roll credits. We don't get that this time. We get a bleak ending with a civilization that is now probably doomed, thanks to the Klingons and the Federation. So, that's my feelings on A Private Little War. I don't know how other fans feel about this. This is one that I've never heard anybody else talk about. Usually, I hear people talk about Tribbles, or Piece of the Action, or Amok Time. Kind of those iconic episodes. This one, I feel, needs to be up there. There were some low points. I thought the monster that attacked them was kind of lame. Regardless of the lame costume, it was just kind of a weak premise. I thought they could have done a little bit more with it, or gotten rid of it altogether. And Kirk's old friend on the planet, his wife, who's kind of a Lady Macbeth type character, could have been developed more. Those were really the only two weak points I would say to this. The way it ends, wonderful. The opening, really great. Like I said, I do wish also Kirk had been out of the picture a little bit more. But this episode is going into my top list. It hits you hard, it hits you heavy, and it asks some really serious questions that we may not have the answers to. So, that's A Private Little War, and I will see you guys later.